Billionaire white family humiliates. Black CEO, she cuts their $4. 9B, survival deal on the spot. Hello everyone, before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing, collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Get out of here. The words tore through the museum's grand hall like a blade scraping marble, sharp, echoing, vicious enough to freeze every breath in midair. 100 heads snapped toward the sound. In the center of the neoclassical gallery, beneath a skylight pouring white gold onto polished stone, an elderly white woman stood inches from a tall black woman in an obsidian evening gown. Her finger was thrust up toward the woman's face, trembling with rage and entitlement. Her pearls shook on her collarbone with every angry inhale. Around them, the gala crowd, navy suits, silk gowns, glittering jewelry swarmed like a circle of startled animals. Phones lifted instantly. Flashlights flickered. Whispered gasps scattered across the hall, each one feeding the fire. The elderly matriarch's voice rose again, vibrating off the marble columns and the marble statues watching silently from their pedestals. You people don't belong in places like this. This is our museum, our gala, do you hear me? You don't walk these halls with us. Not tonight, not ever. No orchestra played. No champagne bubbles dared rise. Even the air seemed to hold itself still. The tall black woman did not flinch. She stood with her arms loosely folded. One hip shifted in quiet superiority, her chin tilted just enough to make the act of being screamed at seem beneath her. Her eyes dark, calm, sharpened by a lifetime of navigating rooms built to exclude her, never left the older woman's face. From the crowd, a younger woman in a yellow gown lifted her phone higher, recording as if the moment were free entertainment. A silver-haired man behind her whispered, just loud enough, "This is going to go viral." God, she's humiliating herself. But they weren't talking about the matriarch. They never were. On the opposite side of the hall, a man in a navy tuxedo, broad-shouldered, anxious, hissed urgently into the ear of his brother. "Do something! Mother's losing it!" His brother shook his head helplessly. "She won't listen. She never listens." The matriarch jabbed her finger even closer, so close it nearly brushed the black woman's cheek. "I said, get out! Before you embarrass yourself further." A wave of murmurs swept the gala, some horrified, some thrilled, many waiting hungry for the next moment of humiliation. The black woman finally moved, not backward, not away, but forward half a step, barely perceptible, yet powerful enough to shift the entire gravitational pull of the room. A single, controlled breath lifted her shoulders. The soft fall of her evening gown brushed against the stone floor like a midnight tide. Every camera zoomed in. Before she could speak, a panicked voice burst from the side of the room. "Cancel the $6B deal. Now!" It came from an older man in a tailored blue tuxedo, the patriarch, his voice cracking like a man who'd just glimpsed the edge of the cliff beneath his feet. His phone screen glowed with frantic notifications, each one worse than the last. The matriarch spun around. "What are you talking about?" He didn't answer. His face was the color of parchment. A hush rippled across the hall. Something massive, unseen but undeniable, shifted under the marble. Every guest felt it. The black woman's lips parted slightly, only the hint of a smile. Not amusement, not cruelty. It was the expression of someone who had already calculated every variable in the room and found nothing surprising. A statue towering behind her cast a long shadow across her frame, an ancient goddess sculpted in stone, silent but imposing. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below, and if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to her. The matriarch regained her fury and leaned in again, sour breath trembling with indignation. "You think you can just stand here, in this museum, among decent people, and look down at me? You're nothing but the black woman raised one hand not to touch, not to strike, but to interrupt, a gesture as soft as silk and twice as cutting. Are you sure? She said quietly, her voice smoothing over the chaos like a dark velvet curtain. You want to finish that sentence? A collective inhale swept through the gallery. Someone whispered, "Oh, she picked the wrong one tonight." On the matriarch's wrist, diamonds quivered like cold sparks. She hesitated only a fraction of a second, but enough. Enough for the room to feel the power shift. Enough for the guests to suddenly, instinctively sense that they had misread the hierarchy deeply. The black woman lowered her hand, eyes steady, posture unbroken, wrapped in an aura of a person who knew exactly who she was and exactly how much power she carried. And as the matriarch stumbled over her words, as fear flickered in the patriarch's eyes, as every camera recorded the world recalibrating, the black CEO finally spoke. This museum may not belong to me, but the future of everyone standing here does. The hall fell silent, completely. The shift had begun. Snow drifted in thin, restless spirals across the museum's marble steps hours earlier, when she first arrived alone, unannounced, wrapped in a quiet elegance that didn't beg to be recognized. A black car door opened. She stepped out, and the wind caught the hem of her gown like it was lifting a banner into a battlefield. Inside the lobby, warmth radiated from chandeliers shaped like frozen constellations. Guests glided past velvet ropes with ease, invitations barely glanced at, cheeks kissed, names celebrated. Laughter floated through the air like bubbles rising from a champagne glass. But when she approached the podium, the atmosphere shifted. The security guard, broad-shouldered, bored, wearing the kind of authority that grows from complacency rather than competence, lifted a hand, blocking her path before she could speak. "Service entrance is in the back," he said, without looking up. She blinked once, the slightest shift of expression, nothing more. "I'm here for the private gala." That made him look, but it didn't make him rethink. His eyes scanned her from top to bottom, not with admiration, but with suspicion draped in politeness. He lifted the guest list, though she hadn't shown him anything yet, pretending to confirm something he had already decided. "What's the name?" he asked, pen poised like a gavel. She told him. His eyebrows lifted in mild disbelief. "Right. Give me a moment." He checked the list. Again, then again, but slower, as if slowness could fabricate doubt. Behind her, a couple approached white, dripping with gala glamour. The guard's entire posture warmed instantly. "Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Bennett. Right this way." They didn't even need to show their invitation. The rope opened like it recognized its owners. When he turned back to her, the warmth vanished as quickly as it had appeared. "Your invitation?" he asked. She handed him the thick, embossed card, same print, same gold leaf, same seal as every other guest. He held it delicately by the corners, as if afraid of catching something. "These can be faked," he muttered. She took in a slow breath. "It's authentic." He didn't answer. Instead, he angled the card toward the light, squinting like he was inspecting counterfeit currency. Behind her, another guest brushed past, waving his phone lazily. The guard let him through without a second thought. "I'll need ID," the guard said at last. She gave it to him. He scrutinized the license like it was an unsolved crime. The photo, the hologram, the edges, her face, then the photo again. "The picture doesn't really look like you." It did, exactly. The wind outside howled. Guests inside flowed past her like water around a stone. She remained still, anchored not by helplessness but by calculation. "Please wait to the side while I confirm this," he said. Then he stepped away. Minutes passed, then 20, then nearly an hour. Snow began to cling to her shoulders through the revolving door's draft, melting into cold droplets along the neckline of her dress. The chill touched her skin, but not her resolve. Through the glass, she could see the guard. He wasn't calling anyone. He was laughing with the coat check girl, casually scrolling through his phone, occasionally glancing at her like she was an inconvenience he hoped would vanish on its own. Another couple arrived, glittering, loud, dressed in winter gold. He waved them through immediately. She lifted her chin slightly, a micro gesture, but enough to steady something within her. Bias didn't surprise her. It rarely shocked her anymore. But tonight, She wasn't here as a guest, hoping to belong. She was here as the architect of a future the family inside desperately needed. The guard finally returned, holding out her ID and invitation with a apologetic shrug perfected by years of small authority. "You're good to go," he said. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just permission he thought she needed. She took her documents with a calmness he mistook for compliance. Then she stepped past him, each click of her heel echoing with the quiet promise of consequence. The museum doors opened. Warmth washed over her again. Music curled through the air. Wealth glittered beneath chandeliers. And somewhere inside, the family who believed they owned this world had no idea the storm they had just ushered in. The museum's inner hall opened like a cathedral of glass and shadow, every sculpture lit as though it were preparing to witness a historic moment. As she entered, conversations floated past her in glittering ribbons: fortune, mergers, art auctions, trust funds. Names mattered here, lineage mattered here, appearances mattered most of all. But she moved through the gallery as if none of those rules applied to her. A quiet force, a presence that didn't demand attention yet rearranged the room the moment she stepped into it. No one recognized her, and that was intentional. For 15 years, she had cultivated a reputation as the phantom architect of the financial world, present everywhere, seen almost nowhere. Headlines mentioned her firms, her initiatives, her foundations, her disruptive acquisitions, but rarely her face. Photos were outdated or blurred. Interviews were typed, never filmed, not by accident, but by design. Power, she believed, was most effective when no one saw it coming. She moved past a glass case displaying an ancient bronze mask. Under the museum lights, her reflection merged with its shadowed features, half modern elegance, half silent myth. She paused, her fingertips resting lightly on the case, and inhaled. She remembered her grandmother's words: "They fear what they can't predict. So, don't let them predict you." A server approached with a silver tray. He gave a polite bow. "Champagne, Mom?" She nodded gently and took a glass. Not because she needed it, but because blending into the choreography of the evening mattered. She was here to observe before deciding whether she would save or dismantle the empire that relied on her signature. Across the hall, donors gathered around a marble staircase. Their laughter rose in elegant waves, champagne flutes clinking like delicate bells. From their silhouettes alone, she could identify them. Old money, new money, desperate money, borrowed money. She knew their companies, their debts, their masks. She had read their lives the way some read stock charts, but she wasn't here for them. She was here for the family, the ones who believed they owned this museum, the ones who believed they owned this city, the ones who believed she was nothing. $6 billion, a lifeline disguised as a partnership, not for her, for them. The patriarch Richard Halden had been courting her investment for 9 months. 9 carefully orchestrated months of charm, strategy, gifts, meetings, and promises. His empire was cracked beneath its polished veneer: over-leveraged real estate holdings, failing international ventures, a looming credit cliff no one in the room was supposed to know about. But she knew. She always knew. Her team brought her numbers every morning like a surgeon receiving charts before a critical operation. Files on debt ceilings, asset conditions, board turmoil. She could recite the Halden Empire's weaknesses from memory: their liquidity drain, their mispriced assets, their chronic mismanagement. And the most fragile piece of all? Their pride. She took a sip of champagne. The bubbles burst quietly, like tiny detonations. Her assistant, Maya, appeared at her side, elegant, composed, moving with the same careful precision she had been trained for. Maya held a discreet tablet, tucked against her arm like an accessory. "They're in the East Gallery," Maya murmured. "Patriarch, matriarch, both children. Press coverage starts in 20 minutes. She nodded once. "And the financials?" she asked softly. "Confirmed," Maya replied. "If you withdraw, they drop 43% by morning. The banks will follow." A beat of silence. "And if I stay?" "Then you own half of everything they pretend to control." She lowered her gaze, letting the information settle like sediment in a glass of dark wine. "To dismantle or to dominate. 2 paths, both within reach." But one path held something deeper. The correction of an imbalance centuries old. A trio of donors passed her, whispering about stock surges and political influence. Their conversation drifted like smoke. She watched them go, her expression unreadable. These rooms, with their gold accents and inherited arrogance, had never been built for people like her, yet she stood in the center of them, grounded, dignified, impossible to bend. She walked toward the East Gallery, her gown whispering against the floor, her reflection gliding across marble like a living stroke of ink. Guests parted without realizing they had. Space opened without being asked for. Power rearranged itself in her wake. A storm doesn't announce itself. It changes the air first. And as she approached the family who would soon regret ever raising their voice at her, the museum's lights dimmed slightly, as if the building itself knew what was coming. She wasn't just a CEO. She was the reckoning they had been courting without understanding the cost. Tonight, they would learn it. The East Gallery shimmered under soft gold spotlights, each beam angled to flatter its subjects, ancient sculptures, rare tapestries, and the people who believed they were just as untouchable. The Halden family stood near the central exhibit, surrounded by admirers, reporters, and the kind of sycophants drawn to wealth the way moths chase flame. But up close, beneath the glitter, the fractures were already visible. Richard Halden, the patriarch, posed for a photo with a senator, his smile stretched too thin to be sincere. His tuxedo was immaculate, tailored to perfection, yet the tension at his jaw betrayed a man dancing on the edge of collapse. He held his champagne glass in a death grip, as if letting go would unravel the illusion he had built over 3 decades. His empire, once revered, had rotted from the inside out. Years of reckless acquisitions, hidden loans, and public overconfidence had hollowed it to its bones. But Richard clung to the fantasy of control like a drowning man clings to driftwood. He had one hope left, one lifeline. A $6 billion deal he whispered about, as if speaking too loudly would break it. And the woman he had screamed at earlier was the one who held its signature. Evelyn Halden, the matriarch, hovered nearby, dressed in a pearl-white gown that shimmered like frost. Her silver hair was pinned tight, sculpted with mathematical precision. Her posture radiated a certain breed of social power, old, inherited, unchallenged, and so fragile it cracked when confronted with something she couldn't categorize. She surveyed the room with practiced superiority, dispensing compliments like currency and insults like weapons. To her, the museum was a kingdom, and the guests were subjects. She had spent her entire life polishing an image carved from privilege, and she expected the world to bow accordingly. Her children stood at her sides like polished ornaments. Julian, the eldest, was handsome in a curated sort of way. Slick hair, sharp jaw, confidence that didn't quite reach his eyes. If arrogance had a human form, it would stand like him, shoulders back, chin slightly elevated, always scanning for someone to impress or belittle. He lived in the shadow of the Halden name, never realizing it was fading beneath him. On Evelyn's other side stood Serena, draped in a gold gown that shimmered like molten sunlight. Her beauty turned heads effortlessly, but her smile was sharp, the kind that cut more than it charmed. She thrived on attention, feeding on rumors, chaos, and social destruction the way others fed on oxygen. Any hint of competition, social, romantic, or financial ignited something vicious in her. Tonight, she was bored. And boredom, for someone like Serena, always led to cruelty. A small crowd circled the family, gasping at every gesture, praising every word. They were accustomed to adoration. They believed it was earned. They believed it was permanent. But even from across the hall, cracks widened. The patriarch's phone vibrated once, then twice, then again. He glanced at it, and the color drained from his face. He set the champagne flute down too quickly, the glass chiming against stone. Serena caught the sound, frowning. "Dad? What's wrong?" "Nothing," he muttered. But it was something. It was everything. Evelyn approached him, her voice dipped in impatience. "Richard, pull yourself together. We're about to speak to the press. You can't look rattled." He forced a smile for her benefit, but his hand trembled as he reached for the glass again. Nearby, the donors murmured, "Did you hear? The Halden group missed another deadline." I thought they had a big investor coming in. 6 billion, right? Some woman, what was her name again? No one knows. She keeps a low profile. Well, they'd better hope she signs. Serena scoffed, loudly enough for the group to hear. Please. Whoever she is, she's lucky to even be considered by us. Lucky. The words slithered through the gallery like an insult meant for the walls themselves. Julian smirked. People like that, they come begging. We don't chase. People like that. As if destiny had been waiting for that cue, the museum lights shifted, spotlighting the entry of a new presence. The room's murmur softened, then stilled. She stepped into view. The black woman in the obsidian gown, the one they had mocked, the one Evelyn had screamed at, the one Richard needed more than oxygen, the one Serena would have dismissed even if she were made of gold. Their expressions fractured all at once. Shock, recognition, dread. Because in that clarity of light, in the way guests parted as if compelled, in the quiet authority with which she crossed the gallery, it became unmistakable. She wasn't just someone who had wandered into their world. She was the world they needed to survive. And she had arrived with the calm of a storm, preparing to choose where to strike first. The room felt suddenly smaller, as if the marble walls had drawn inward to witness what was about to unfold. Conversations dimmed. Champagne flutes paused mid-air. Every camera, every whisper, every wandering eye tilted toward her, pulled by a gravity so quiet and absolute it didn't need to announce itself. She walked straight toward the Haldon family, not quickly, not dramatically, just with the measured calm of someone who had already chosen the ending. Richard Haldon swallowed hard, his throat bobbing against his starched collar. Evelyn stiffened. Serena's painted smile flickered. Julian's handshake with a donor faded mid-gesture. She arrived at the perfect center of their small kingdom, the space they believed was theirs alone. For a single heartbeat, no one moved. Then Evelyn broke the silence. "What do you think you're doing back here?" she snapped, voice pitched high enough to betray nerves she couldn't mask. "Haven't you embarrassed yourself enough for one night?" The words ricocheted across the marble like brittle shards of glass. Several guests winced. A reporter lowered her camera, but the woman in the obsidian gown did not blink. Her voice, when it came, was velvet over steel. "I didn't embarrass myself," she replied softly. "I simply stood where you didn't expect me to stand," Evelyn scoffed. "You don't belong in this gallery. You don't belong in any." That's when she lifted her hand. Just a single gesture. Not rude, not loud, but final. "Are you certain?" she asked. "You want to start this conversation with belonging?" The room inhaled sharply. Julian stepped forward with a forced chuckle. "Look, let's not turn this into something dramatic. We're all here to celebrate. Just enjoy the evening, all right?" His attempt at diplomacy only highlighted his desperation. Seated nearby, a donor leaned to her companion and whispered, Hez sweating. Another murmured, "Is that the investor?" A third, "If it is, they're in trouble." But only one voice mattered now, Richard's. He stepped forward, shoulders tight, voice trembling with a mixture of apology and dread. "I believe there's been some misunderstanding," he said. "If we could just speak privately, I'm sure we can resolve." She looked at him, and he froze. Her gaze was not angry, not wounded, just unbearably clear. "There is no misunderstanding," she said. Evelyn's jaw tightened. "You think your little scene at the entrance gives you the right to Evelyn." Richard's tone came out strangled. "Stop." But she didn't. "That woman should feel grateful we even allowed her through the door," she hissed. The last word hadn't even faded before the temperature seemed to drop. She turned slightly, just enough for the overhead light to catch her eyes. Behind her, the towering statues cast long shadows that made her silhouette appear taller, sharper, almost mythic. Then she reached for her clutch, a small movement, but in this room it landed like thunder. She withdrew her phone, a simple device, thin, black, unremarkable, yet in her hand it carried the weight of an executioner's blade. Maya, positioned discreetly by a column, lifted her own phone in silent readiness. Serena scoffed. "What, are you going to record us? Post it online? Do your worst." A soft laugh escaped her, barely audible but devastating. "No," she said. "I don't record consequences. I authorize them. Her thumb slid across the screen. One message. 3 words. Pull everything. Now. Maya's phone vibrated instantly. The Halden family went rigid. Every muscle, every breath. Richard's voice cracked. Wait, what did you just do? She slipped her phone back into her clutch, as if she'd merely checked the time. Ive made a decision, she said. The same way your wife made hers when she screamed in my face. Evelyn's skin whitened. You can't. I can, she answered. And I have. A man in a Navy suit, one of the family's senior partners, burst through the crowd, face ghost white. Richard, he gasped. The withdrawal just hit the system. All 6 billion. Gone. A collective intake of breath swept the gallery, but she wasn't finished. She stepped closer, close enough that only the Halden family could hear the final nails. You should have treated me with dignity, she murmured. That was the only investment you couldn't afford to lose. Then she turned away, leaving them suspended in silence thick enough to drown in. The storm had finally touched down. It was as if the museum itself had exhaled and frozen mid-breath, waiting to see whether the world would tilt. But in the quiet, something else stirred phones buzzing, screens lighting up like tiny alarms blinking across a battlefield. The first tremor hit Richard's phone, then Julian's, then Serena's, then the devices of every board member aligned with the Halden empire. One after another, vibrations rippled through pockets and clutches, a stuttering heartbeat of collapsing wealth. A senior executive in a charcoal suit stumbled toward Richard, his face drenched in panic. Sir, our primary lender just pulled their extension. They're demanding immediate collateral review. What? Richard croaked, and the man swallowed hard, turning to the black woman still standing with composed stillness. Their decision cites her fund's withdrawal as the trigger. Julian's face reddened. This can't be happening. You can't just freeze a multi-billion-dollar agreement in the middle of a museum. She glanced at him. Then you underestimated what 6 billion buys. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Power, when real, didn't require volume. Across the gallery, more notifications went off. 3 major investors pull out. Halden stock outlook downgraded. Corporate insurer requests. Urgent review. Overseas HQ. Halts disbursement. Each alert landed like a hammer. Serena gasped as her own phone lit up. Dad, my trust account. It just dropped 23%. Julian's voice cracked. This is sabotage. No, she said softly. This is arithmetic. The donors who had worshipped the family minutes earlier now shifted their gaze, calculating, uncertain, ready to step away from sinking marble. Their smiles faded. Their bodies pivoted subconsciously toward the woman in the obsidian gown, drawn to the axis of control. 2 compliance officers invited as guests, now activated by crisis, approached Richard with stiff urgency. Sir, one said, we're receiving inquiries from federal oversight about the liquidity inconsistency in your filings. They want an explanation. Evelyn snapped. Explain what? We are the Haldens. The officer didn't blink. Yes, ma'am. That's why they're asking. The subtle humiliation a mirror held up to arrogance left Evelyn speechless for the first time all night. Then the financial SWAT team arrived. Not in uniforms, not with sirens, but through encrypted systems, remote terminals, midnight awake analysts, board directors awakened in other time zones. Maya stepped forward, tablet in hand. We're synchronized. A quiet code phrase hovered on her screen. Operation. Full extraction executed. With a single slide of her finger, she displayed real-time movements, accounts shifting, assets relocating, authorizations disappearing like smoke. Everything the Haldens had hoped to save was evaporating under museum lights. Richard staggered. Please wait, there must be a mistake. She turned to him, expression steady, almost gentle in its truth. There was a mistake, she said, and your wife made it the moment she decided to degrade me in public. Julian lunged forward a step. You can't base a financial decision on some argument. She looked at him with eyes that had evaluated thousands like him, men born into privilege convinced it was competence. You think this is emotional? She said quietly. But this is structural. You don't build partnerships on contempt. You build them on respect. Her gaze swept across the crumbling family. You had the deal, she continued. You had stability. All you needed to offer was basic humanity. And you couldn't, Maya's tablet chimed. All heads turned to its glowing screen. Halden Group share price down 19% in pre-market international branch. Credit halted, major partner suspends joint project. A woman from the museum's board pressed her hand to her chest. 6 billion. Gone? Just like that? Maya nodded. Money is fast when respect is slow. The gallery, once filled with the soft murmur of luxury, now echoed with the raw pulse of consequences. Serena trembled. You ruined us. No, she replied, calm as stone. You ruined yourselves. I simply refuse to finance the damage. A final alert pinged through the Halden's phones, a synchronized chime of devastation. Julian glanced down, his face draining. Dad, the press just got the story. The museum lights flickered just once. A symbolic, quiet bow to the power that had just redrawn the room. And as the echo of digital collapse spread through the hall, one truth crystallized. Actions had been authorized. Consequences had been delivered. The empire was falling quietly, precisely, irreversibly, and she hadn't even raised her voice. Panic has a sound. It isn't loud. It isn't chaotic. It's the tight, breathless rustle of people realizing their world is collapsing while everyone is watching. And that sound filled the East Gallery like rising smoke. The first domino fell when a museum patron, an older man in a burgundy velvet jacket, took out his phone, read a notification, and quietly stepped away from the Halden circle. No apology, no explanation, just distance. A woman in diamonds followed him, then another couple, then a small cluster of donors who had been laughing with Evelyn minutes ago. The shift was slow at first, then sharp, like a tide snapping back from the shore. Serena noticed immediately. Why are they leaving? What's happening? Somebody say something. But no one answered. They didn't need to. Reputation moved faster than money, and hers had just been set on fire. Against the marble pillars, the live news ticker on the museum's giant screen updated in real time. Someone in the tech booth tried to switch it off, but the alert kept resurfacing across partnered feeds externally, impossible to hide. Breaking. Halden Group faces severe liquidity crisis. Investor withdraws 6 billion causes. Chain reaction market expects further declines. A murmur rippled through the hall like a gust of icy wind. Cameras that had once captured glamour now turned slowly, hungrily toward the unfolding humiliation. Julian spun toward the black woman, voice cracking. If you don't restore the deal, thousands of employees will be affected. People with families, mortgages. You're punishing them. Why? For her? He jabbed a shaking finger at his mother. His desperation was raw, but it only revealed the truth Head spent his life avoiding. She met his accusation with the calm precision of a surgeon. I didn't break your company, she said. I simply stopped holding it up. Julian's throat tightened. Serena's eyes glossed with fury. Evelyn looked as if she'd been carved from salt. Richard, quiet until now, suddenly sank onto a marble bench, face hollow. A man who once commanded boardrooms now looked like a fragile relic displayed in the wrong exhibit. He spoke without lifting his head. We needed that investment, he whispered to no one, to everyone. We needed it to make payroll, to keep the creditors at bay. Without it, everything we built, his voice cracked, everything will be taken. She watched him. Not without empathy, just without illusion. You built your empire on borrowed time, she said softly. I'm not the reason it's falling. I'm only the moment you can no longer pretend it isn't. The room froze, her words landing like a verdict delivered by the universe itself. Across the hall, the orchestra, who had been waiting for direction since the confrontation began, lowered their instruments, realizing music would only underscore the family's ruin. A museum coordinator rushed to Evelyn, panic swallowing her professionalism. Mrs. Halden, your foundation's pledge for tonight. It appears the bank has frozen your charitable account. The auctioneer is asking if he should pull your lot. Evelyn's mouth opened and closed like she'd forgotten how to speak. Pull the lot, the phrase echoed across the gallery. The Halden name, once synonymous with influence, was now a liability. A guest whispered, "They're finished," as if narrating the scene for future gossip. Another whispered, "That woman, she's terrifying." But it wasn't terror, it was clarity. The kind that revealed who held real power in a room and who merely borrowed it. Serena's voice cracked into something almost feral. "You've ruined our lives. Do you hear me? You ruined them." "No," she replied. "I revealed them." Serena stepped forward, trembling so hard she dropped her clutch and didn't notice. "Fix it," she demanded. "Fix IT. Now." A hush swept the gallery, guests staring, cameras trained, the museum's ancient statues looking down as if judging the spectacle. She didn't move, didn't break eye contact, didn't raise her voice, didn't try to overpower Serena's hysteria. Her stillness was the power. "You expected me to be small," she said gently. "Now you're learning what happens when the people you underestimate stop shrinking." Richard looked up then, eyes wet, pride finally broken. "Please," he whispered, "give us another chance. For the company, not for us." It was the closest he had ever come to humility. But humility earned through collapse was not the same as dignity freely offered. She stepped back, the soft brush of her gown whispering against marble like a curtain drawing closed. "Tonight," she said, "the consequences arrived." Her gaze swept across the shattered family. Evelyn's rigid rage, Serena's trembling desperation, Julian's stunned disbelief, Richard's defeated silence. "And tomorrow," she continued, "the world will follow." Phones buzzed again. More alerts, more decline, more fallout. The Halden legacy once plated in gold was turning to ash in real time. And she didn't have to lift a single finger to push it over the edge. All she had to do was stop holding it up. She stepped forward, just enough for the museum lights to crown her silhouette in a quiet blaze. The crowd parted instinctively, reverently, as if sensing they were standing in the presence of the true authority in the room. Her voice, when it came, was low, but it carried like a sentence carved into stone. "You mistook access for superiority, and my silence for permission." The words struck harder than any shout. Evelyn's breath hitched. Serena froze. Richard bowed his head. She gave the room one final look, steady, sovereign. "I don't raise my voice," she said. "I raise consequences." She turned from the shattered circle of privilege and walked toward the museum's grand doors, each step echoing like a closing chapter. Behind her, the Halden name unraveled across every glowing phone screen, headlines, market alerts, silent disbelief. Outside, the cold night met her with quiet respect as she slipped into her waiting car, city lights reflecting against the glass. Empires could be inherited, legacies could be fabricated, but dignity that was earned, defended, and never negotiable. Tonight, she hadn't destroyed a family. Shed revealed the truth beneath their gold.